Ladies and gentlemen, the editorial content producer and team reporter of the Hurricanes, Walt Ruff, everybody.
Fellas, what's going on? Thank you for having me. I was enjoying the conversation, just patiently waiting in the lobby, and I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna join, and if I get thrown into the fire, I'm thrown into the fire. So what better way to do it?
There you go, absolutely. So, I'm assuming were you at the preseason game last night?
Sure was. It was good to be back at the Lenovo Center and get that hockey feel. The first of Gosh, I don't know how many games are going to be in that building between now and hopefully the middle of June, but we always joke this time of year, you're striving to hit the 100 club because you get, if you count Prospect Showcase, you got 3, you got 6 preseason, you got 82 regular season, so if you're around that 100 game mark, that means you're doing something right. So hopefully the first of about 100 between now and the late spring, right approaching summer.
Absolutely. I mean, we've probably crossed that 100 game threshold quite a few times in the Rod Brindamore era.
Yeah, we definitely have. It means we've had some shortened summers after unfortunately not reaching the ultimate result, but when the team does, it's going to feel that much sweeter.
I love how you say win, because I think we all know that at some point with this core that we have now, it should be coming.
And exactly. You got to believe, right? You got to believe, fellas.
So
Always.
the first thing I want to talk about is the off-season additions brought in this year. Namely, we've got Nikolai Ehlers and Keandre Miller. What have you seen in practice from them? Like, what do you think they add to the team here?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch those guys get up to speed. The fan base was excited, myself included, was excited all summer about bringing these guys in because anytime you can go into an off-season and it was well understood that Nikolai Ehlers was going to be one of the biggest fishes available, and anytime your team can land that guy, you feel good about it. And we know that this team has the ability to get creative during the summers as well. A couple of years ago, nobody knew Brent Burns was available, and then when he was brought in, that was a huge move. Now the very similar situation with Keandre Miller. It's been fun to get to know those guys a little bit. It's only been a couple days so far, but I think we're all pretty excited about Keandre Miller and Jalen Chatfield potentially working together, as well as Nikolai Ehlers skating alongside Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. So hopefully within the next couple of days, I would think tomorrow we'll probably see Nikolai Ehlers, maybe not Keandre Miller. He's obviously still working in the no contact jersey so far, and Rod Brindamore says they're going to be cautious with him. So it might be a little bit till we see him, but just like y'all, I'm excited to see them when the games get going for real.
Is he looking like he'll be on track for opening night, or?
I don't think there's been one comment made one way or the other, to be honest, yet. The only thing Rod Brindamore has explicitly said is that they're just being cautious with him. And, Keandre's been in the league for a couple of years now. He knows what his body can and can't handle. And so when the games get going for real, I think I would feel good that we'll see him probably sooner rather than later.
Awesome.
So the Prospect Series just wrapped up a couple days ago. Which player from the team do you think showed the most potential to crack the roster this year?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question because I think we got a little bit spoiled last year with the whole Jackson Blake situation. It's pretty uncommon year over year that any of those guys make the NHL roster, but obviously Jackson did last year. Now I think a lot of people are wondering who's this year's Jackson Blake, right? Truthfully, I'm not sure that anybody will make the opening night roster out of that group. I know that there are a lot of eyes on Bradley Nadeau during the preseason play because he scored 32 goals in Chicago last year. So offensively, there's not a ton left for him to do, but he's got to round out his game, right? You have to be more than a one-dimensional player to play for Rod Brindamore. So, even if he does go to Chicago, I think that that's totally okay. I heard you guys talking about Justin Robidas a little bit earlier. I love his game. I think he's so smart. He's so responsible. You can almost just kind of tell that his dad was an NHL player and is now a coach. But if I had to give you one name who I think we're going to see at some point this season, and other guys you all were appropriately speaking on a moment ago, it's Charles Alexis Legault. He's an absolute unit. The young man's already 6'4", 215 pounds. He plays with some snarl. We know that this is not an overly physical Carolina Hurricanes team, but that's kind of Charles Alexis Legault's calling card. He skates extremely well. When I look at the way he defends, it makes me think of like a Brett Pesce style player, both right-handed, very good gap control, and that's something that Tim Gleason and Rod Brindamore are obviously looking for. We know that this is a team that prioritizes defense first. So now with that being said, I think it's going to take maybe a couple injuries, or it could be the final handful of games of the regular season, which, knock on wood, hopefully the Canes already have a playoff spot locked up like we saw at the end of last year with Dom Fensori and Justin Robida. I think that Charles Alexis Legault is probably maybe one of those guys this year. And also when you look at how much has been talked about with the Canes having 4 left-handed shots and only 2 right-handed shots in the blue line to start this year, Charles Alexis Legault is right-handed. We know that the team prefers to go 3-3, so I think that there's a lot of promise for that young man's career.
I'm not gonna lie, that I heard you on, I believe, the first intermission last night talking with Adam Gold.
Yeah,
I noticed the same things. I mean, I watched a period of the prospect series, and he stood out to me. And then watching last night, I could also tell in that game. So when I heard you talk about, it, I'm like, okay, this is a guy I need to do a little more research on, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that that's totally fair. I would venture to guess that a lot of people amongst the fan base are probably still learning the name as well. He was a late 5th-round pick only 2 or 3 years ago. So I think that he's the guy who's trending upward on a lot of people's radars right now.
Now I think, wasn't he with the Syracuse Crunch past season before the Wolves? Or how did we end up picking him up?
He was a draft pick in 2023, I believe, and then went to the Chicago Wolves of the American Hockey League last year, and I believe that's his only year pro at the moment.
Okay. I've got another question here about the renovations planned for the Lenovo Center this year and the coming years. What changes do you think will be coming for the Canes home this season?
Yeah, the 2 big ones that the organization's really focusing on right now are the bunker level suites, which are on, the ice level, A level. There's a lot of excitement about them for the clientele that wants to bring out some people to a game, kind of like a high-end experience. But I think for something that I'm a little bit excited to see in a lot of the fans too is the 300-level Sky Bar. It's still closed off right now. I think it's on pace to open up early this season, but just a little bit something different. We know that the world's evolving, right? Not everybody wants to go and sit in a seat for 60 minutes and watch the game. You want to be able to have other options while you're there at the game. So the Sky Bar and the bunker suites are the 2 big things that are getting done first. And as you guys all well know, it's going to be a process over many, many years. The whole area around the Lenovo Center is going to look completely different 5-10 years from now. But the process is underway, and it's exciting to see these things finally starting to come to fruition.
Absolutely. Sean, we're going to have to get you to a game whenever that takes place.
Yeah, I know. I have to fly down. It'd be awesome. I'm from Toronto, by the way.
Nice.
So we got our Canadians covered here. So speaking of like exciting potential and stuff, obviously we talked about Ehlers and Miller being like the big fish for free agency to trade, but arguably, if not definitively, the biggest change this offseason is bringing in Alexander Nikishin for his rookie year in the NHL. And I don't think I've seen more hype behind a Canes prospect ever in my time watching a team. Now, granted, that's a limited 6 years or so, but what do you see in him that justifies all the hype that he's gotten?
Yeah, well, I think you're exactly right. Obviously, I can only speak on the last 5 years, which was when I started with the team. But ever since I arrived in Raleigh in September of 2021, when it was just a year after he was picked, there was a lot of hype already, and it just grew year over year over year. And, he's doing these amazing things over in Russia, and he's the all-star, and he's leading the league in points by a defenseman, and he's finally here. And I had posted last night, it's kind of surreal because we had waited for so many years to see him in a Hurricane sweater. And then he had one of the highlights of the night last night for Carolina. I know they weren't a ton, but that hit he had on Dylan Duke early in the second period, my goodness. I feel pretty confident in saying that's probably the biggest hit laid in NHL preseason thus far. I know we were only a couple days in, but He's an absolute monster, and I loved Rod Brind'Amour's quote after the game about him, and he said he's still kind of just freewheeling and relying on raw talent at this point, because we know that it takes a little bit for players to get used to Rod Brind'Amour's system, and it's vastly different from the way that the team that he was on in Russia was playing. So it's going to take a little bit of time. There will be some growing pains for Alexander Nikishin along the way, but what we saw last night was just a tiny glimpse, and man, I'm just excited as y'all to see more of him.
You know, the last check like that I can remember seeing was opening night, I believe in 2023, when Dmitry Orlov in his first game with the team hip checked someone from the Ottawa Senators. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, it's a great callback. That was a good hit. Good open ice hit. You're absolutely right.
The two Russians.
I wish we would have seen
one comes in. Orlov. Sorry, Jack, go ahead.
I wish we would have seen more of that from Orlov with his time here. Unfortunately, we didn't, but we saw some of those good hits.
Yeah.
I think Nikishin's definitely going to bring that. And like Walt said, if we get Charles Alexis Legault in here at some point, could you imagine like the hits that would be laid out if those two were a pairing together?
Just adds a layer. You know, we heard so much during the playoffs last year about bully hockey and the way that the Florida Panthers play. I think that the Canes have a desire to get there. They're not going to force it. They're not going to rush it. But that would be that's a lot to be excited about for certain.
Well, even with the PTO with Giovanni Smith, I saw he was in a fight with I don't remember who on Tampa last night, but I liked seeing that level of.
Yeah. I mean, those PTO guys are looking to make an impression, right? And I don't know that Rod Brind'Amour wants to do it in the fashion of kneeing a guy and then having to drop the gloves, but
yeah,
he's really right in saying that it's never a bad thing to possess the ability to drop the gloves. I loved what we saw the other night from Gabriel Landeskog in Colorado. Cale Makar takes a hit, and there's your captain coming in and stepping in. I love that. I know that fighting's going by the wayside in the game, but I think that there is still a role for it, and you have to have someone who is at least willing to.
Another guy whose name I heard quite a bit last night was Tyson Jost. We know that he's kind of a, we'll call it tweener, so generally the first guy up from the A to come when someone's hurt. What do you think his role? Do you think his role will be something similar this year as it was last year?
In a perfect world, if everybody's healthy, probably so. I believe we saw him in 39 games last year, and that's about what you kind of want to expect, right? Because injuries are inevitable. Somebody's always going to go down. What I like about Tyson is that he has the ability to play both the center and the wing. Having that versatility, because let's be honest, he's probably never going to be your 1C or your 2C. If you do, you've got a lot of injuries or something's going astray. But when you need a guy like you had referenced to recall from Chicago, he can play at the NHL level. He showcased that. He's a depth option. We know that this organization prioritizes depth as well. So if everybody's healthy, hopefully he's doing great things in Chicago. And I think it's also a valuable piece to have there, because look at how young Chicago's roster is. And I know that I'm not calling Tyson Jost an old man by any stretch of the imagination, but he's been around the block for a couple years now, right? He knows, he can still play at a high level, and he can help lead some of these guys who are 20, 21 years old. So I think it's great that the organization kept him around for another year.
Speaking of players that we have just resigned or just gotten for a year, I was very interested to see about Kevin Labanc last night and his unfortunately called back goal. But what do you think about him?
Yeah, first of all, great play by Tyson Jost. I know it came out of the zone by just a couple inches, but I think Kevin Labanc made an impression last night, and I think that's what you're looking for, because he got an assist on the power play goal. Obviously, it was Carolina's only one of the night. He had a would-have-been goal, so I would assume that there are some eyebrows on the bench being raised when he does some things like that. And this is a guy, too, who I don't even know if necessarily you could fully call him a tweener, because he played the entire year in the NHL last year. So it's interesting that he finds himself in this spot again, because last year he was on a PTO with New Jersey Devils in camp and got signed by the Columbus Blue Jackets. So if he has another great training camp, even if there's not room in Carolina, somebody's watching, right? Because like we were just speaking on a moment ago, injuries are inevitable. You can only have as much depth as you think you do. And when somebody goes down, do you have guys who can play at the NHL level? And Kevin Labanc can still play at the NHL level. So whether it's here in Carolina or elsewhere, obviously I'm hopeful for his sake that he'll get a shot.
For players fitting in Carolina, I love to talk about the guys that are like lower down, and of course, injuries are inevitable. But speaking of some of the players that are currently on the roster, where do you think guys like Stankoven, Blake, and Hall fit into the lineup this season in terms of their chemistry with the other forwards?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought some of those guys up, because when you talk about Logan Stankoven and Taylor Hall, we think of them as Hurricanes now, but they only came in midway through last season, right? I think from last night's preseason roster, Jackson Blake was the only guy who played more than 40 games with the Hurricanes last year, which is crazy to think about, because this has been a roster that's so much was made this time last year about how the roster turned over because so many guys went out the door in free agency. There's been a considerable amount of retooling done on the fly over the last year. We talked about Alexander Nikishin a minute ago. He's just coming in. Taylor Hall, acquired midseason. Logan Stankoven, acquired midseason. So I think the fact that the Canes are finding ways to utilize all these pieces, and not just utilizing them, they're going out and getting them. Like Eric Tulsky's famous quote on Logan Stankoven is, he was built in a lab to be a Hurricane. If you have somebody who's built in a lab to be a Hurricane, you want him to be a Hurricane. And I think Taylor Hall, too, when I think about him, I love the fact that he's gone from, over the course of a year, to having to be this top-line guy on a young Chicago team that, probably doesn't really have playoff aspirations, to coming to a competitor where thus far in training camp, I know Rod Brindamore doesn't number his lines, but he's on the fourth line. And if you got a guy who's a former MVP and a guy who's hung in the scoring race for a couple of years on your fourth line, that's a pretty good sign. And we've used the term depth already this season. So, I started to think about how many other teams around the league have a fourth line that could hang with that. Say opening night were tonight, and you've got a fourth line of Taylor Hall, Eric Robinson, and either potentially Mark Jankowski and or another center, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. That's a pretty good fourth line, right? There's some teams that have fourth lines filled with, tweeners, if you will. Like we used the term a moment ago. You're probably not hanging with a guy like Taylor Hall who still has it. So I love the question, and honestly, I love thinking about the role that those guys could have this season.
And so you brought this up, and last night intrigued me. So last night, Logan Stankoven was the first line center on the preseason roster, which intrigues me because the one spot on this Canes roster that we don't really know about being set is that second line center position. And I'm sure that there's been talks about that within the team for a long time now because, through the off season and all that, that's been the question that's been going around like the entirety of Canes media is who's going to be the second line center for opening night. And so I get the feeling that we still don't know right now who it would be. But what did you see from Stankoven last night in terms of playing center?
Yeah, you're spot on, Carter. I mean, really, it's been kind of a glaring issue since Vincent Trocheck left during the summer of 2022. He got that big deal with the New York Rangers. It was extremely well-deserved. They've lacked a natural right-handed center for some time now. And of course, they've given Jesperi Kotkaniemi the opportunity to continue to grow into that role. And now it's time to give that opportunity maybe to somebody else. Can you get by with Jesperi Kotkaniemi as your number 2C? Absolutely. Does he maybe have an opportunity to play more of his game in the 4C role? Potentially. But through one game, I think it's so far a thumbs up for Logan Stankoven. Now, you're absolutely right. We're a long ways away from October 9th's opening night. A lot's going to happen between now and then. You guys know Rod Brindamore. The lines are probably going to change 6 different times over the next 17 days or whatever y'all mentioned until we have to opening night. So it's a day-by-day thing, really. But when we asked him post-game last night, it seemed like a pretty positive review for Logan Stankoven playing the middle. I got to sit down with Logan on Friday and ask him for his take on the situation, and he had played center all the way until he hit the pro level, which was only 2-3 years ago at this point. And he said the only reason he wasn't playing center, which I found fascinating to learn, was because in the American Hockey League, he was on a line with Maverick Bourque, who was one of Dallas's previous first-round picks. So he got the opportunity first. He was just a year older and was there sooner. So, maybe it's just a natural opportunity for Logan Stankoven to go back to what he considers his most natural position. He said he knows he needs to be good at faceoffs. He needs his defensive responsibility to continue to grow, but Rod Brindamore loves his ability to be creative through the middle of the ice, and we know that this team really has a desire for more creativity, which of course you're hoping leads to more goal scoring. So far so good for Logan Stankoven. That could change tomorrow, but for the here and now, I think everybody's pretty happy with it.
I mean, Logan Stankoven's first goal with the Hurricanes was him being net front for Connor Hellebuck against Winnipeg. And I remember sitting in the stands that game being like, why is little Logan Stankoven our net front right now? But it was.
I mean, calling a spade, that's one of his biggest knocks, right? It's his size. He's not a very big guy. But then you look at where he always is, and that's in and or around the net or around the dirty areas. You kind of just have to let some of this stuff go by the wayside, because how many times have we seen that now in recent years? Wasn't that one of Seth Jarvis's biggest knocks? Oh, he's not very big. He goes to the hard areas of the ice all the time. So these guys have a willingness to do the hard things. And of course, you kind of need to under Rod Brindamore, but that's that Carolina culture.
And then one more question, one more thing here. This is something we've talked about kind of on stream when we're trying to figure out the 2C situation. If Stankoven does get that spot, do you feel that Kotkaniemi would fit as a good winger on the third line with Stahl and Martinook?
I think it's something we might see. I think that would be a work in progress in terms of figuring out if Stankoven does stay there for a little bit. I could also see a world where it's just a small experiment for Stankoven. We know he can play on the wing in this lineup, right? We saw he had a pretty successful final 20 games of the regular season, and then I believe he led the rookies in points in playoffs. So we know he can play the wing. Now it's just a matter of how much runway does he have to play center, and if that does stick for a little bit, you bring up a good point. Maybe we see Jesperi Kotkaniemi in a different role, because if down the middle, again, hypothetically, if opening night were tonight, if you go Sebastian Aho, Logan Stankoven, Jordan Stahl, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, where does Mark Jankowski fit in? He's a natural center. So I think that there's some fluidity to the entire situation, which is what makes this time of year so fun.
Now, I know you mentioned Jordan Stahl's name, and we have a question here about that. His impact as the team's captain, as well as other leadership roles from veterans in the locker room. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Sean, because maybe a guy like Jordo doesn't get the credit he deserves, because there's a lot that goes on that we don't see. Even I don't see it, right? To the media, I think, he has a way of commanding the locker room. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to all the time, but when there's a time for a voice to be heard, there's a reason why when you ask Rod Brindamore about what goes on in the locker room, he always points to his leadership group. He knows that those guys have him. He knows that Jordan Stahl is going to convey the same message that the coaching staff wants. He knows that sometimes it's not always Jordan Stahl. It can be Sebastian Aho, who's, one would think, probably the future captain of this organization, right? Somewhere down the line, whenever Jordo's done. But you've also got guys like Jordan Martinook, who we know he's loud, but he's a dead serious individual when it comes time for it, and he can carry that message. Jacob Slavin, we know he means business. He can send out that same message. So a lot of people talk about the culture with the Carolina Hurricanes, and the more you look around the league and wonder, does that organization have the same culture? That's not a knock on them. Maybe they have it in a different way, right? Maybe it's a very strong head coach's message that he's the one dictating it every single day. But with Rod Brindamore, his culture is, I have my message. Maybe I don't need to be the guy, in his terms, driving the bus every single day. He always talks about everybody having a seat on the bus, and sometimes it's got to be somebody else pulling the rope. There's that accountability within the Hurricanes locker room, and I think that especially when you've got a guy like Jordan Stahl wearing the C, you've got a good leadership group in there.
I feel like Rod's very much a player's coach.
Yeah, that phrase always trips me up a little bit, because, of course, you ask all 32 coaches, are you going to go to bat for your players? Everyone's going to say, yeah, right? But I think that, in a sense, all of the guys absolutely respect Rod, and they know that he's going to put the work in. Like, when they get to the rink, Rod's already in the gym. Like, it's just that accountability and wanting to go into the fire with the next guy because you have a head coach that leads by example.
I've got a
Well, I mean, Rod could still probably play hockey at the NHL.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, his physique, like, of course.
100%. And I think that goes a long way, right? The phrase lead by example. And Rod Brindamore does that.
I mean, my favorite Rod Brindamore story personally is I went to one of the practices at Invisalign Arena, and it was before I had this jersey, but I wanted to like meet him and like, get a picture with him or whatever. And so the entirety of the team is gone. I think it's when Chatfield's injured, so he came out about 20 minutes after everybody else. And the only person we knew left was that was in there was Rod. And it's raining outside, so we're like huddled up in rain jackets, me and one of my other friends. And he comes out an hour later after Chatfield leaves. He's like, "Well, you guys outlasted me." He was in there lifting weights an hour plus after practice was over.
Lead by example, right? That's what it always comes back to. First one in, last man out. He gets it, right? He played at the high level for a very long time, was a very good player. He's a should-be Hall of Famer. When you've got a guy like that leading your organization, it's not a surprise why the Canes have been a playoff team the last 7 years.
So we've got one more position that kind of gets talked about quite a bit. And this one I feel is more due to injury than anything, but the goaltending situation. Because we unfortunately know that with Freddie Anderson, there's a high likelihood of repeat injuries occurring, which, to be completely honest, has not hindered us too bad in the past couple of years because, I mean, he'll sit out for half the regular season, come back in, get a couple reps in before the playoffs, and then he's been really good for the playoffs for the most part the last couple of years. And I know you've talked with the Surge cast before, and I saw maybe a month or so ago, they mentioned giving Piotr the starter's crease this year to kind of see what you have in him if you need him to be your like main starter. And I guess kind of the idea is looking for when Freddie is inevitably going to be, on a different team or retire because he is getting up there in age. What do you think about letting Kochetkov have the starter's crease for this season?
No, Rod Brindamore was asked about that over the weekend, and he said in a perfect world, and to be honest, this has kind of been his same answer the last couple of years. It's in a perfect world, it's 41 games for Frederik Andersen, 41 games for Pyotr Kochetkov. If he can do the 50-50 split, that's what they're going to do. Now, it's how do you adapt when, as we've said several times already, that inevitability of injuries happens. And we've seen Pyotr get hurt over the years too, right? He's missed some time, so where I would go with this one is the organization got real serious about addressing depth over the summer. This time last year, they had Spencer Martin coming up. Yaniv Peretz was coming behind him. Ruslan Hajayev was in his first year pro. They went out and got guys who have played at a very high level now. If Frederik Andersen goes down, I think the first recall would probably be Caden Primo, who won the AHL's Best Goaltending Duo award last year for his work in Laval. I thought he looked pretty good last night, to be honest. So there's your number 3. Amir Miftakov, who's been really strong in the KHL the last couple of years, as your number 4. So there you go. I mean, now knock on wood, hopefully you don't need more than 4 goalies. Yeah. We've seen it happen over the last couple of years. And then, of course, you've got Ruslan Hajayev and Nikita Kwap as your 5 and 6. So they've got 6 signed goalies coming into this season. You're absolutely right that injuries are going to happen. It's just a matter of what they do when they do happen. But the odds that one of or multiple of those 4 are playing well when you need one, you feel good about the odds. So that way, to throw it back to last year, you're not having to sign Dustin Tokarski to come off the street, right? He did a great job when he had to come up for Chicago, but the organization really shored up that ship before this season took off.
To stay on the goalies there for just a second, I know we drafted Semyon Frolov, who is an incredible prospect. When do you think the window is that he'll ever come over to Carolina, or what do you think about him and the whole situation?
Yeah, like we see with a lot of drafted goalies from overseas, they have several years left on their contracts with their current team. So I think it might be a little bit for Frolov yet. Another name that I'm keeping close tabs on, Igor Velmakin. He had come over for development camp a couple of years. So I think that there's some real potential there. He's played in some KHL games in the last couple of years with Minsk, so I think there's some real potential there. And now in North America, Ruslan Hajeyev, his year-over-year growth is really high too. So when I think about the future of goaltending with the organization, you're right. You think about Frolov because he was the first pick this year, but then between Velmakin and Hajeyev, I think the Canes have some real potential coming up at the position.
Here's the question. I mentioned this on a video that I talked about. I think it was the Kochetkov career simulation we did. Do you know who the goalie was when the Hurricanes last picked a goalie with their first pick in the draft?
Cam Ward. Sure do. Looked into that one right away when they picked Frolov at this summer's draft. I thought, wow, I don't know how many times that's happened. And sure enough, Cam Ward's the only one, right?
Yep.
There you go.
Pretty funny because Carter likes to reference that we drafted, the Tennessee Titans quarterback.
Hey, the hockey goalie Cam Ward has poked fun at that too. I remember on NFL draft night, he posted a video of him on his couch, and he's like, "I got drafted first overall."
Love Cam. But speaking of, goalies' defensive play, it's been a little bit up and down on who's going to be in the top pairing with Slavin this year. And of course, Rod's going to like to experiment with a lot of different options. So once things start to settle out and start to come together, who do you think is going to end up being that top pairing with Slavin?
Yeah, I think that's still a little bit of a TBD. Obviously, it stinks not having Jacob on the ice right now through the first couple practices of training camp. But if I had to guess based on some things, I think we might see Sean Walker in that role, at least to start. Now, again, like the rest of the lineup, I think it's going to be fluid, but I say Sean Walker because when you look at what else has gone in training camp, you've had Keandre Miller with Jacob Slavin, and then you've also had Alexander Nikishin with Shane Gostisbehere. You've had Mike Riley, who probably is planned to be your seventh defenseman this year. We see that they kind of use that Band-Aid type system. So you've got Riley, who's also a left-handed shot, working with Sean Walker. So you've got the lefty-righty pairing going on right there. And I think Sean Walker, another guy who came to the organization last summer, showed that there might be some more offensive potential in his arsenal. So I think we might see that at some times, but I think it might move around a little bit too, because again, when you've got all these different pieces, if that's the way it's going to shake down, that means Shane Gostisbehere is playing his offside. How's that going to work? We won't really know till the games get going, right? If you need to move him back to the left, who goes over to the right? You're probably not going to put Alexander Nikishin there because you want him to feel as comfortable as possible. So he's going to want to play his natural side on the left. But again, it's just that trickle down, right? Of, is it Keandre Miller moving to his offside? Do you give that a chance because there's some potential there? Is it Jalen Chatfield coming up? So I think we're going to see a variety of different things over the first few months of the season. I really do, until we really settle in on something. But it would not surprise me if Sean Walker gets the first crack.
I do have one question about Nikishin, because I saw a stat online that I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it said that about 80% of the play time that Nikishin had in the KHL, he was playing on his offside. Is that true?
That's a good question. I can't say I'm overly familiar with KHL advanced stats, but I would believe it to be true because he was obviously playing at a very high level over there. And, anytime you're a multi-time all-star and leading the league in scoring by defensemen, you kind of have the ability to do what you want. But now he's adjusting to a different size ice surface, different system. So do I think that he has the potential to play his offside in the NHL? Absolutely. One day. I know he's going to get there. But for the here and now, do I think they're going to ease him into that progression? I do.
I don't know how much more time for questions you have, but I know we've got one written down here.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the ceiling for this year's Carolina Hurricanes, and which teams in our division do you think will be competitive to get that number one spot in the Metro?
Well, listen, fellas, I'm an optimistic person at heart, and I'd be lying if I said anything other than I think this can be a Stanley Cup team, right? It almost kind of feels, as we sit here on September 23rd, I know that crazy things happen during the hockey season, but look at all we've seen during the last couple of years. We've seen goalies go down. We've seen mid-season major trades, and they still find a way to be a playoff team. I think it comes back to the culture. I firmly believe in my heart of hearts right now, if we fast forward to the third week of April, this team's in the playoffs. And I mean, you look around too at some like I always laugh at like the gambling odds, the betting odds, and it's like, If you put $10 on the Carolina Hurricanes to make it to the playoffs, you'd win 91 cents. Real whopping number, right? So like it's almost a lock just as a playoff team. Anything happens when you get in, right? It's a factor of who's hot, who's healthy, who's got good goaltending. And I think that the Canes can be all three of those things. So the ceiling, Stanley Cup, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not really going out on a limb on saying that. We know that Eric Tulsky will say that. We know that Rod Brindamore will say that. We know that just about anybody in the locker room will say that. So I firmly believe they can be there in the middle of June. As far as the division, I think that's a fascinating question because you look up and down. I think almost every team has a chance to be a playoff team, right? There's so much buzz about the New York Rangers and the moves that they made in the offseason. They've got a new captain now, and JT Miller and Mike Sullivan behind the bench. I think they could be a playoff team. The New Jersey Devils are on the rise with some of these players that they've coming up. Like Jack Hughes is one of the legit best players in the league now. I think they could be a playoff team. The Philadelphia Flyers are hoping to grow off of what they did last year. Same thing with the Columbus Blue Jackets. They knocked on the door. The Washington Capitals were the best team in the Metro last year. So, you keep going up and down, and that's not to omit the New York Islanders and Pittsburgh Penguins, who, oh, by the way, still have Sidney Crosby. I think anything's possible in this division, which makes a lot of these games this year really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I agree with you. Yeah.
I'm hoping obviously it's Carolina, but I hope a Metro team makes the Cup final this year because I, for one, am kind of sick of the Florida Atlantic teams making the Cup finals the last 6 years. Would love to see it be someone else.
I'm with you, and hopefully it's these guys this year as we're all repping right now. I think that's what we want to see, right?
Absolutely.
100%.
Just kind of crazy, though, because the last time a Metro team made the Cup final was when the Caps won it.
We're due, fellas.
Yeah, we
We
are
are
due.
indeed due.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. It was great to talk with you again. Really looking forward to this season. Maybe if I can, I'm 2+ hours away, but I'll be at some games this season. I won't be able to make it to as many. I know Jack can probably make it some. I don't know if you heard us joke about it in the before we started about Jack going to opening night in a white shirt with just a big old QR code slapped on the back of it.
Marketing 101. I like the idea, fellas. Your head's in the right place. But no, seriously, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. Obviously, perfect timing with this being the first off day of training camp. Still giving me something to do. So I appreciate all three of you. And good luck with the rest of the show.
All right. Thank you, Walt.
Awesome. Thank you so
guys,
much.
have a good one.
You as well.
You
Bye.
too.